to reconstruct a crime, to make sense of it for the layman, the judiciary, and even under certain circumstances, believe it or not, for the criminal himself, is the solemn duty of the detective. Therefore, he must construct his case like a house of cards, making absolutely sure that it will resist every attempt to knock it down. So, my friends, mes amis, let us begin from the beginning with the murder of the Reverend Babington. You were right, Mademoiselle Haig, and I was wrong for once. Both you and Charles Cartwright believed that the Reverend Babington had been murdered. I did not think it was possible to impose on a victim a glass, a particular glass, on a tray full of identical glasses.
Isn't all this rather obvious, Monsieur Poirot?
Well, it may be to you, sir, madam, not to me. The second crime was announced to me by Charles Cartwright himself in Los Angeles, and I immediately assumed that it was two parts of the same crime. But who could possibly, in light of this, have been there to murder the Reverend Babington? Well, there was Miss MI3A. The other was Charles Cartwright. But neither of these two were at the second murder. At the second murder, the main suspect was Carlos Morales, the butler, who seems to have disappeared into thin air. Although there was one guest who attracted more than usual attention to himself, Senor Montoya. When we were presented to one another by Miss Haig, she referred to you as a communist. She said this laughing. I smiled when I heard it, until I noticed a look of overt hostility between you and the Reverend Babington.
We had our ups and downs, Monsieur Poirot. It was mainly about Central America. Nothing serious, though, only arguments. In any case, I'm not actually a communist.
But my regard for personal liberty is such that I don't care what you are, so long as it doesn't culminate in murder, of course. However, your performance at the second party was most unusual, too. You arrived in a disheveled condition, saying you'd had an accident nearby. And then you revealed that this whole scenario was the idea of none other than Dr. Strange. In written instructions to you, when asked to produce them, you said they were destroyed. And you did not convince either by the newspaper clipping which fell from your pocket, the subject of which was, of course, benzodine.
Somebody must have planted it on him. We already told you that.
Yes, very well, Mademoiselle Haig, but by whom? Perhaps Miss Crisp can cast some light on this, or is it all too obvious? Actually, I rather agree with you, Mademoiselle Haig. Everything that Montoya has said and done has been too convenient to be convincing. I think that the more extreme and far-fetched his story is, the more I tend to believe him. You see, a really clever criminal would realize that only someone who was present at both murders would be suspect. And now, who was not present at the second murder? Well, there was, of course, Miss MI3A, there was Mrs. Babington, there was Charles, and there was last but not least, myself. Could anybody have given the impression that they were not there while being there? This is where the mysterious butler, Mr. Morales, comes in. He behaved in a very strange way, arriving only minutes before the meal began in order to serve it. The room was dimly lit by candlelight. The butler walked with a pronounced stoop, probably due to some arthritic conditions. And if Rosa, the parlor maid, was intrigued by the butler, she was even more so when he answered the phone and brought a message to Dr. Strange. There was nothing at all amusing about this message. It came from the nurse who was attending Mrs. Rushbridger in the sanatorium. Nothing amusing, and yet Dr. Strange chuckled and kidded with the butler. You're a steady fellow, he said, and a first-class butler. It was almost as though they shared a private joke. There was, in fact, a private joke between them. The nature of that private joke, well, when the time came for the butler to disappear, it was not terribly difficult. For one reason, He did not exist. And that was the nature of the surprise which Dr. Strange had promised Mademoiselle Haig. At a given moment, the butler was to straighten his back, take off his disguise, and there in all his glory was to stand
Charles Cartwright?
the man of 1,000 faces.
Well, thank you very much, Perot, but you're wrong. I don't do that kind of work anymore. I've retired. I couldn't fool anybody.
You think you're fooling me now?
I don't know and I don't care, Perot. How can you pretend to know everything that's happened when you weren't even there?
Even a reputable critic has been known to leave after the first act. It's never prevented him from writing a review.
Yeah.
But there is a small difference. I returned for the third act to see if my review was watertight.
May I shoot some holes in it?
Yes.
What would have happened had Carlos Morales, the disguise, been discovered earlier?
Oh, well, then you would have had your usual round of applause. You're quite used to that, and general laughter. And you would have been invited to join the dinner party as a guest. Charles, your pride in your work is enough to prevent you allowing that disguise to be penetrated. Dr. Strange knew this, and he chuckled in advance as he imagined the general gasp of surprise. Unfortunately, his gasp of surprise came first when he took a lethal dose of benzotine. After that, everything was as easy as it had been during the death of the Reverend Babington. You switched the glasses in the manner that I demonstrated during my cocktail party. Then you were interviewed briefly by Colonel Matteo. You packed your bags and you disappeared forever through the secret passage in the library.
And Dr. Strange's letter to Ricardo?
Yeah, what about that, Perot? Did Carlos Morales write that note, too?
I'm extremely clever, as you know, but I'm not a clairvoyant. I have no idea how you addressed when you wrote that, nor indeed when you planted that newspaper article in the pocket of Senor Montoya, which was discovered, of course, by Miss Crisp, a woman of insatiable curiosity with a particular fondness for murder. Rosa Sanchez, the parlor maid, was leaving the servants' quarters when she heard a noise and was forced to hide. This noise turned out to be Miss Crisp poking about in the library. Both Mr. Dayton and Senor Montoya claimed that she was behaving in a suspicious manner, obedient, no doubt, to the mongoose instinct for finding out. But let us not be too hard on Miss Crisp. She was the only one, Charles, out of all of us, to really alarm you, because she was the only one to really notice that butler. And there was something about him which was strangely familiar. The voice, she didn't know what it was. But things really came to a head a little later when you visited Angela Stafford's apartment. You were not there to help in solving the murders. That would be too much to ask. You were merely trying to find out if any suspicions had been aroused about yourself. Then something happened which in itself was insignificant, but it became crucial. You offered our friend Miss Crisp a cup of coffee. At that moment, she noticed on your wrist a scar, which was the same scar she had already noticed on the wrist of Carlos Morales. You see, Charles, there are no disguises which are completely impenetrable. She confided this in me after your magnificent performance during my cocktail party. She was terrified that she might be the next victim.
I want my day in court.
As defense attorney?
I never played a defense attorney. May I?
May the prosecution have one more moment of your time. You see, Charles, there were 3 murders, not 2.
3? They all can't be me.
Mrs. Rushbridge? Charles played yet another one of his galaxy of wonderful characters. An old groundskeeper of the sanatorium. He even tipped a small boy. to take a message to the telegraph office. You see, with that instinct which made of him a great actor, he felt curiously that this net was closing around him. He even sent Mrs. Rushbridger a gift of liqueur-filled chocolates. The liqueur in question being, of course, benzotine. The idea was that Mrs. Rushbridger had been killed because she knew too much. In point of fact, the poor darling, she knew nothing at all, was incapable of knowing anything.
Do you rest your case?
My case rests.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Your Honor, I'd like Monsieur Hercule Poirot to take the stand.
Is that your famous limp?
What do you know about my limp? Huh?
Everybody knows about your limp. It's world famous.
Oh. Monsieur Poirot, what is the motive for the crimes in question?
Yes, you had to kill Dr. Strange because he'd been looking after you for a very long time. The official reason given for your premature retirement from the entertainment business was a certain nervous fragility when overworked. This is very far from the truth, of course. The truth is that there were paranoid and psychotic elements in your makeup which could at any moment lead you to unreasonable or even violent behavior. Dr. Strange knew this. He also knew the secret about the scar on your wrist. It was due to an attempt at suicide. I'm worried about M, he wrote. I don't like it.
No. M, Margaret, Mateo, Montoya, Milray. Do I have to remind you that my name is Charles Cartwright?
A name given you by a film studio who deemed that Edward W. Muggins was inconsistent with a romantic lead.
And we must be consistent in everything, mustn't we? I'm famous for being consistent. What is the reason for Babington's death to be consistent in logic?
That is a good question. It is not consistent in the everyday sense of the word, but in the sense of the theater, it would be called, I think, a dress rehearsal. In fact, Babington happened to die, but it could have been anyone. There was no motive, you understand, apart from a purely technical one. You wanted to see if the poison worked, if it was possible to change the glasses. It was possible. Therefore, it was a wonderful dress rehearsal for the real premiere, which was the necessary death of Dr. Strange. I say necessary because, Charles, he was the only person that could put you away. This is monstrous! We will see how monstrous it is. I will ask Miss Milray, excuse me. Now, you see, Charles, Miss Milray, when she found that orchid spray in the gardener's hut, she suspected that you were the murderer. And when you gave that wonderful performance at my party, Charles, there's one face I wanted to see at the very moment of your death. It was that of Miss Milray. For a moment, she was profoundly shocked and then gave way to the deepest despair. She was torn, you see, between her love for you and her horror of what you had done. I followed her to the garden shed. She tried to destroy the evidence. I'm afraid, Charles, she did not succeed. That evidence is now with the police, as well as your passport, in which is clearly marked the time you returned here in order to kill Dr. Strange. And you returned to Los Angeles by the very next plane in order to break the news to me in a voice of anguish.
Who are these people?
What are you doing in my house? Get out of here! Why do you let these people arrive here?
Charles,
Why are you all staring at me?
Charles! It's a wrong performance. This is the moment to show dignity. It's a moment to show us what you are made of.
You mean like Sidney Carton in The Only Way? Smiling his way to the scaffold.
Yes, if you wish. Except as here, there's no scaffold. There's just peace of mind, Charles. And, Charles, an infinity of roles to play.
It's a pity you didn't see me as the groundskeeper. I had the audience of one small boy. I used my implement. Wherever they take me, I'll be out in a year. I'm going to give the greatest performance of my life in that sanatorium. Level-headed, rational, and above all, consistent. Huh? Good. Do you think I'm going to struggle? Well, you're wrong. You can put away your straitjackets. You can put away your hypodermic needles. You're not going to need any of them. I'm going to tell you one thing, senors. I may be charming, debonair, and handsome. I may even at times be dangerous. But I am not, I repeat, not crazy.
I've been a fool, haven't I?
No, mademoiselle, merely young. And youth is often mesmerized by age, as age is mesmerized by youth. Don't you think so, Comrade Montoya?
Please, Monsieur Poirot, I'm not even a socialist. Really.
Who cares what you are?
I'm really sorry about all of this, Ricardo.
So am I.
I must congratulate you, Monsieur Poirot. That was a brilliant summation in there. Quite a display. I should think it would make a wonderful conclusion to your book.
My book? Oh, I'd forgotten all about my book. Why not our book?
I beg your pardon.
You know, modern crime is so busy. There's a body falling out of a cupboard one minute, another rising from the lake. You never know where you are. I have no time. Now, if I had a collaborator, someone with a mongoose instinct, what do you think of that?
I think it's a grand idea. Are you serious?
I'm absolutely serious.
Good Lord, Poirot.
What is the matter now?
It's just occurred to me.
What?
When that poison cocktail was handed round.
Yes.
It could have been me.
I thought of an even worse thought.
What's that?
It could have been me.
Latest on the upcoming Reagan-Gorbachev meeting in Iceland and talk with former President Jimmy Carter tomorrow on the CBS Morning News. Tonight on CBS Late Night, a Castle ghost becomes a prime murder suspect on Hot Shots. Then a self-reliant prospector makes wealth from water in the Ballad of Cable Hogue. It's all tonight, after your local news.